I'm a current with the Florida Gators.
Okay. I was just checking to see if you were listening.
From Destrehan, Louisiana. Hold on a second.
Hey, guys! Hey! I'm having a press conference, okay? Thank you.
Momentum, excitement, energy. They say all this stuff, and you know what they mean, but it doesn't describe what you mean. It's just sort of out there.
You got barbecue back there, and you didn't invite me. Hurt my feelings.
I was just worried about, listening to, all your guys' rap poison.
Welcome to Sideline Judgment. Here are your hosts, Sergio and Tyler.
Welcome to Sideline Judgment. My name is Sergio.
My name is Tyler.
And today, Tyler, a little bit delayed. A little bit of time has passed.
A lot of it delayed, if we're being honest.
A lot. Literally a week later, we are now recording our episode about the college football playoff national championship game, in which the Michigan Wolverines ended up beating the Washington Huskies 34-13. The score, I think, is indicative, makes it seem like it was a bigger blowout than it actually was. In my opinion, Tyler, this game was kind of bookend of a Michigan dominance on the front half, Michigan dominance on the back half, and then the middle was kind of where things got fun and interesting. But ultimately, Michigan ended up winning their national championship, the first one since I think 1997, I believe was the last time. Jim Harbaugh, patron saint of Michigan, comes home, wins them a Natty. And unfortunately for Washington, they suffer their first loss of the season. Tyler, What say you? Opinions, thoughts?
Well, first of all, this is huge for Michigan and the Big Ten. Is the first Big Ten team that's not named Ohio State to even make it to the championship game in the championship era.
The playoff
era. Michigan's first outright national title since the 50s, I believe.
A long time.
Huge, and like Nebraska, Penn State, and Michigan State have all won titles since then, but none of them in the championship game era.
Right. Wait. Nebraska, Michigan State, and who?
Penn State.
They all won national championships more recently than Michigan before this one.
Before a week ago, yes.
That is an absurd stat.
Well, obviously, outright championships. I think
outright
Michigan
titles. Okay, that makes sense.
Michigan claims a co-champion thing with Colorado. I think I don't remember to be exact with you, but on that note, this was a huge game but just talking about the game, huge win for Michigan. This game, in my opinion, was won off the backs of the line of scrimmage and their defense. The defense, I think, was the big one, is the thing. That defense is running like an NFL defensive scheme, and really they get a lot of credit for really throwing Washington off all night. Michael Penix in particular. And so it's interesting because I think in the first quarter, Michigan's running game was really going all over the place, getting whatever they wanted. Washington, to their credit, defensively really settled in.
Yeah.
I believe that Michigan only got one third or fourth down conversion the entire game.
But that's also kind of skewed because they didn't really have many third downs.
That's true. But
in the beginning, they definitely throughout
in the second and third and even parts of the fourth quarter, like Washington really bowed up and stopped like Michigan's defense, Michigan's offense, which brings us to the other side of the ball, where part of our analysis for why we picked Washington is that like it's impossible to pick against a quarterback and receivers who are connecting at the level they're connecting at in that Texas game.
And as revered to be NFL talent as everyone has been hyping them up all season.
Yeah. And while that is true, it's one of those things like, because the analysis we had is that like how do you defend that? You can't defend the perfect throw.
Right.
But they didn't make Michael Penix Jr. unfortunately did not make those perfect throws in this game. He was off in this game. Credit to Michigan's defense for just absolutely getting him off his spot. Washington's offensive line won the Joe Moore Award for the best offensive line in the country, and yet still a award that they deserved, and yet still was not enough for the simulated pressures for Michigan's defensive line. And on top of that, Michael Penix Jr., he just missed a couple throws. And I think it's part of a bigger conversation. I think it's happening in both college and professional football. So many times, I think Washington had 4 possessions where they were down by a touchdown in the second and third quarter, and they were unable to come up with any points. And so many times in the past 10 years has it been like best defense in the country versus the best passing attack and quarterback in the country in college football. And we just expect inevitably for that best passing attack and that best quarterback to win that battle. Because in these championship games, so often they have. Like, that's just what has happened. Is that eventually the best quarterback in the country comes through.
Right.
However, in this game, it was the defense that really clamped down and came through. And we're seeing scoring has gone down in the NFL. Scoring, I think, is going down in college. Maybe football is shifting in its cyclical pattern back to really making it about the running game, as these defenses with the 2 high looks are basically making it so that it's impossible for you to throw the deep ball.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Michael Penix Jr. was only able to complete a couple very deep passes in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Only really able to attempt ones. Their screen game was working for the most part, but I mean, if you're dinking and dunking against Michigan, you're playing the game that they want you to play.
Exactly.
And, that ultimately was the difference. I think the score 34-13 is indicative of I think how good of a team Michigan is,
mm-hmm.
while not being indicative of how close this game really was.
Right. Yeah. You look here, and it was, like you said, a 7-point game all the way through the fourth quarter. Right.
Yeah.
I want to echo your sentiment about the defensive line success that Michigan's defensive front had. And I think that that's where the game was won, inside the trenches on both sides of the ball. So in that same example, the reason that Michigan's defense was able to play that too high and take away that deep ball is because they trusted their defensive front to get pressure to Michael Penix Jr. to force him to either make a rush throw, to force him to throw the check down, eliminating the deep ball, eliminating those high-level wide receivers that they have in Rome Odunze, Jack Westover, Jalen Polk, all those kind of guys, Jalen McMillan. All of those guys were kind of neutralized in a way, maybe not as you can see on the stat sheet, but if you watch the game, you kind of realize that Michigan wanted them to throw the checkdowns, wanted them to run the football with their injured player, Dylan Johnson, stuff like that. So I think that definitely was and played a factor. But then on the flip side, right, you look at Michigan and what was the game plan going in? It was exactly what they had done the entire season. Give the football to Blake Corum, to their All-American running back, to what we can kind of unequivocally say. I think looking back now, Tyler, maybe Blake Corum should have been in New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony, given some of the other players and options.
College football player.
Right? This is
college football player.
Another one of those that I think just because he doesn't play quarterback / isn't this highly touted out prospect for the draft, but also big name. Marvin Harrison Jr. is unequivocally I think the best non-quarterback in this draft, or skill position player maybe. But, I think definitely his name and the fact that he played at Ohio State and the fact that there was hype going into it played in him being a finalist for the Heisman. Whereas Blake Corum was just churning out big games and being the focal point of this Michigan offense every single week. He had 21 touches for 134 yards and 2 touchdowns in the national championship game. This man averaged 6.5 yards a carry in the national championship game. Something to be said about that, and something to be said about the Michigan offensive line as well.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things where I do think that I don't think Marvin Harrison Jr. should have been at the Heisman ceremony, because why are we like? I don't even think Trevor Lawrence should have been at the Heisman ceremony the year that he was there, because it's like it's not about like your NFL prospects or a legacy award. It's like, what, are you a good college football player, and are you the season you're having,
right?
And it, but Blake Corum definitely I think would have deserved to be there considering the season that he had, especially after. And yeah, speaking of Michigan's offense, I mean, like, it was weird because JJ McCarthy played all right.
He played the JJ McCarthy game.
They didn't ask him to do anything. Like,
they haven't asked him all season,
which is why it's so funny, because now he's officially declared for the draft. I don't know what to think of this man.
Here's the thing about JJ McCarthy. I agree with you. I don't know what to think, simply because I know he's talented. Like that throw again in the Ohio State game, that throw that he made for the touchdown in the first or second quarter that split 4 to, like, that was an insane throw. Like, I know that he has the ability to make those. It's just, why didn't Michigan trust him enough to make those throws, especially in big games like this? Like, he was 10 for 18 on 140 yards. Okay, great. And he clearly was the leader of that Michigan offense. But you should be able to trust your quarterback, especially one that's been so highly touted like JJ McCarthy. And it was, this is going to be different. And then Michigan's entire style of play this season was run the football. It was very SEC, old school SEC type of football.
They put that Jake Coker tape on, and they were like, "All right." They won a national championship today.
But seriously, like, it was a very, and we will talk about this later on today, Tyler, and listeners, you will have this episode, should be following up this episode right here on your feed. But it was very 2013 Nick Saban-esque at Alabama. So it was run the football, get you that running back. Blake Corum was playing the Derrick Henry role, and they just were able to kind of dominate. Even Donovan Edwards had 6 touches for 104 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, they won this game on the ground, right? And I just think it's indicative of what they've been doing the entire season.
That's really a testament to, and we'll kind of pivot to the coaches here, like, it's testament to Jim Harbaugh. He's won at every level. He's achieved the mountaintop that he's chasing. Ryan Day was waking up in sweats, I imagine. But to have caught and surpassed Ohio State, to have reached the zenith, and doing it in his own style, in his own quirky way, like, not necessarily with the top 2-3 recruiting classes, but with the, like, seniors returning, a solid recruiting classes, really good recruiting classes, but the infrastructure. I think Sharon Moore had a brilliant offensive game plan. He's had brilliant offensive game plans the whole season. And obviously their defense is running like an NFL level scheme. The current Ravens defensive coordinator for John Harbaugh, like, was on this Michigan staff last year, and Mike McDonald, that defensive coordinator, is the talk of the NFL as the next, like, big defensive coordinator. So, I mean, doing it in his own way, Jim Harbaugh finally reached the top of the mountain. I don't expect him to be in college football next year, but that's just me. But on the flip side, like, I really thought Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb had a really good offensive game plan.
I agree.
For this game. I think that they knew they had the plays drawn up. But like we talked about, I think it just is as simple as Michael Penix Jr. was off, and he missed some throws that he shouldn't have missed. And it's one of those things where, like, they very clearly, it's been a trait of their tenure there at Washington, is trusting their players.
Yeah.
And they continue to trust Michael Penix Jr. to make those plays, even when he stopped making them. But that being said, it really is the difference, is that the superstar quarterback missed the throws he had to make. And
how much do you think that rib injury that we saw him pick up during the game, how much do you think that played an effect in the second half?
I think it was pretty big. I think with how injured Michael Penix Jr. has been throughout his career, and a rib injury, rib injuries kind of just affect your entire torso. Like, it's not just like right here where you think a rib is. It's like it wraps around. I'm sure he's playing through it, but on top of being sped up on his internal clock through the Michigan defense, trying not to take sacks, trying to get the ball down the field because that's what they do best. Just all those factors, the rib injury, adding in another one, I think that does have a huge part to play. And it's unfortunate, but that's part of the game.
I hear you.
Ultimately, I'm very happy that we got this national championship game of a Pac-12, Big Ten, a Pac-12 and a Big Ten team, soon to be 2 Big Ten teams, because it's nice to not see like an SEC team or Clemson in here, or Ohio State.
I agree with you. I just think it's not so much like SEC fatigue that I have. I think it's more so, I think this was a good representation of the 2 best teams in the country this year. And I'm glad that these are the 2 teams that ended up in there. I wouldn't say that the 4 teams in the playoff were the 4 that I would have put in. I would have put in Florida State over Alabama. But the other three I was definitely on board with, and I was definitely on board with, the results that we ended up getting, right? The entire season throughout the whole Jim Harbaugh multiple, um, do I even want to call them scandals, or do I want to call them just like distractions, right? Because like there were
Honestly,
two
they're
separate.
distractions to me because I don't, and that's
Mhm.
the thing. I don't think that this team will ever really be asterisks in that way. Like,
Okay.
because I don't know. I mean, I saw them win the national championship. You can't ever vacate that from my eyes.
It's like
Like,
the Reggie Bush Heisman. It's like, no, I was there. I remember. Can't tell me that didn't happen. I saw those games.
but I don't know because like despite all that, this team continued to win.
Mm-hmm.
Continued to win in spite of that coach and continued to win in spite of the distractions. I don't really think Michigan is America's team or anything like Jim Harbaugh claims, but that's his own quirkiness. But
Oh, well,
I
we've seen that when people call themselves America's team, it doesn't go well in the postseason. So I don't think we can call Michigan America's team.
no.
Boom.
Boom.
Anyway,
Subtle dig. Very
subtle.
subtle
Sorry,
dig.
I'm miserable, and so I will make other fan bases miserable as well. But given that, okay, you answered my next question, which was if this kind of season will have a stain on it or an asterisk moving forward. I agree with you. I don't think so, because I don't think that the quote unquote cheating or advantage playing with the Connor Stallion situation, I don't think that it affected the result on the field. I definitely think that it maybe gave them a bit more intel, but again, I am a person that if your signs are able to be deciphered as easily as they were by Michigan, then maybe you should be changing your signs. But I also see the other side, and I actually agree with Michigan kind of taking it a bit too far of sending scouts in person to other games and this whole operation that happened. I think my biggest issue overall, and this might be the last thing we talk about it because obviously we're going to move forward, but it's just like, don't play the victim. You know what I mean? I feel
Yeah.
like this is why Michigan's reputation outside of, the Michigan faithful kind of took a hit this season, and Harbaugh's in that way, because they were very much acting like, can you believe that they're coming after us? Can you believe that they're persecuting us? And it's like, no, dude, like, you did something, you got caught, and like, yeah, while everyone else probably does this to an extent, like, you got caught and you had this whole thing. So own it, embrace it. And if you didn't think that you were guilty, then you wouldn't have taken away your, what's it called? Rescinded your complaint, and you wouldn't have fired a couple of linebacker staffers, and you wouldn't have implemented discipline and all of these things if you truly thought that you were completely innocent of the situation as you pretended to be. That's my only issue with the situation. But no, I don't think it affected this Michigan team in terms of would anything else have gone differently in the season? No, I still think Michigan wins all 15 of their games. I still think that they have a dominant offensive line, defensive line, running back, win in the trenches, and just a deeper roster than everyone else that they play. I don't think it changes that.
Like to Michigan's credit, they learned the lesson they needed to learn, and that they were like, okay, we want to win a national championship, we got to get a little bit ruthless. Like, you can't. That's part of the thing, is that like there is such Michigan holds themselves in such the goody two shoots kind of way,
right,
of football, and they finally were like, maybe we get our shoes a little dirty. And that is to be in some ways that is to be commended in some way, that they recognized that what they were doing was not enough.
And they made the changes necessary.
Yeah, and they got caught. And you know what? Never comply. That's what I always say.
The NCAA is a kangaroo court. Don't you forget it.
Don't you forget it.
Let's talk a little bit. Let's talk a little bit more about Washington, if you don't mind.
Yeah, let's talk about Washington.
So we're recording this on Monday, January 15th, and we all know that Nick Saban retired, and we all know that Kalen DeBoer replaced him as head coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Excuse me. Gasp. So there is a distinct possibility that when this game is played again next season in Seattle as a Big Ten conference game, that both teams will have new coaches. What, from the Washington side, Tyler, are you expecting for next year? Because obviously Michael Penix Jr., Rome Odunze. I believe that's Jalen McMillan and Jalen Polk. I believe those guys are all gone to the NFL or declaring for the draft. You
Brandon Trice
have
is gonna be gone.
you have a lot of people that are leaving the organization. Offensive coordinators also leaving and going to Bama with Kalen
It's
DeBoer.
hilarious because Nick Saban wanted him, and
Yep.
he said no, but now he's there anyway.
Yep. That's some 3D chess right there. That's some 3D chess right there. From the Washington side, what do you kind of take away from this? Because you make a national championship game, you win the last ever Pac-12 title game. You win the Pac-12. You're the last ever Pac-12 champion. You really have this nobody believes in us season. You beat Texas in the Sugar Bowl, which is essentially a road game for you on a big time stage. What do you take away from this if you're a Washington fan, and what do you see going forward from the Huskies, given all their changes?
If you're a Washington fan, I am very sorry for you because it's going to take a minute before you get back here.
And it's been a rough week.
It's been a real rough week. Pete Carroll retired too. It's rough in the Pacific Northwest right now.
Yep.
But Washington is not necessarily the level of the program of this. I think they're kind of a bit, but this is like Virginia Tech losing the national championship with Mike Vick. This is like the Marcus Mariota Oregon years. This is like there was another team the last time Washington was here where it's just like there are several ways to win a national championship. The number one is just recruit better than everyone else.
Yeah.
That's the most common. There's number two, which is that have a truly exceptional development program where you're recruiting well, but on top of that, you've got seniors staying, guys who have played a lot of ball. You are a mature, deep team, which is the Michigan route. And in a lot of ways, Clemson is the way that Clemson won as well. It looked a little different on the field, but Clemson did very much. They recruited well, better than I think Michigan numbers wise. But it was like they were not pulling top two rosters in the world in the country. They were more like a roster number 10, but their development was elite. And the third way is that just have a superstar quarterback and everything align at the right time with your team, with the seniors, with the players you have, uplifted by the rising tide of a superstar quarterback. That's the third way you win a national championship. Washington had that this year, and a lot of those guys are leaving, and they're a great program. They're about to get a lot more money. So it's very possible they could be back here again. They made the playoff twice, which is more than a lot of teams have made the playoffs. So, they absolutely could get back here again. But it is a thing where it's unfortunately, I don't think that this season was a sign of a page turning for Washington. This was just a special season, much like TCU last year, where I'm this doesn't necessarily make me change my opinion of the program long term. This is just the height of what they can get to. And
yeah, I see it. I just think
I hope I'm wrong, but I think it's going to be a couple seasons. They need to get another superstar quarterback. They need to maybe build up that offensive. If they build up the offensive defensive line, maybe they don't need to. But
and as of right now, we don't know who's replacing we already do. Yeah, it's Jed Fish.
Oh, we do.
The Arizona coach. Which we're going to talk about that a little bit later on, Tyler. We'll hold that one for later on. I do want to kind of bring it back to just the end of the college football season. Now that we have the Natty out of the way, now that we know Michigan won the title, what are you going to remember most about this season on the field? Because obviously, I think what we'll remember most is Nick Saban retiring at the end after the national title game. But apart from that, right, on the field, what are you going to remember most about the 2023 college football season?
What am I going to remember most about this college football season?
See, because for me, if you got it, go ahead, my man.
No, go ahead.
For me, it was going to be just the fact that Washington really was a bend, don't break situation. The entire season, we really did count out Washington, and we really did kind of throw away the potential for them to be this good of a team, and they ended up proving us wrong week after week after week. even throughout most of the season, myself included, a lot of us said, hey, Oregon is the better team. And if they play again right now, then Oregon is going to win straight up. And then they did play again. And then Washington beat them yet again in the Pac-12 title game. So for me, I think that's one of the stories that I'm going to remember. I think I'm going to remember the Iowa offensive just embarrassment that happened with such an elite defense. I think that there's just a lot. Obviously, the last season of the Pac-12. There are a lot of storylines this year, Tyler, that I think what we'll remember on field
There's a lot.
as much as we
I'm
will.
glad you mentioned the Iowa one because
Mhm.
cool, buddy. Uh, I think to me, it's a lot of it is the sheer amount of teams ascending to contender status this season. We are just not used to that many teams this season being viably you could look at them and be like, that could be the national champion. We said that about Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Oregon, Washington. I think there was a point where we were like, oh, maybe Oklahoma, like FSU, but like there were just more good teams this season than there used to be, and I think part of that has to do with I think the transfer portal is a big part of this season to me. I know it's been around for a minute, but the way that it's evolving, the way that roster management is changing in college football, all the quarterbacks going everywhere, but kind of the more evening out the equilibrium of talent, and just what that allowing for more teams to be good. That is something I remember, and I think that's an amazing thing going into the 12-team playoff era. This is the last year of the 14 playoff. I think that's kind of one of the big things that there seems to be a little bit more parity than there has been in a long time. Throughout college football. If we're looking at it for what to think about from the top, but
I agree.
Yeah,
I think this was the first. This will be a transition year. Looking back, right?
Yeah,
This is the first year that I think we really saw the actual effects of what the transfer portal and NIL can showcase us. I think this is the last year. Hopefully, it's the last year of the whole COVID extra year of eligibility.
That is something worth noting about.
We might have an 8th year super senior next year that I don't know about, but for the most part, I do believe everyone is kind of rinsed out from that situation. And so we really are in a new era. The way that the kids that were recruited this year were all recruited in a post NIL and transfer portal era. So they kind of understand, they kind of came of age with college football in that system, knowing it. These high schoolers were aware of it. I do think it's going to be a transitional year, and I would be remiss, Tyler, if I didn't pour one out for the Pac-12, because
the last year of the Pac-12 is probably one of the best ways to think about this season.
If you're going to get hosed by the other conferences and you're going to get disrespected and thrown to the side, the best thing that you can do is put out an absolute banger of a product on the football field this year. And Jed Fish reviving Arizona, Washington being Washington, USC, the whole
all the drama of USC.
Exactly, right. Like they were a weekly news story. Washington State at the beginning of the season definitely was kind of coming out of nowhere. Oregon State and Jonathan Smith, right before Jonathan Smith left to take the job at, I believe, Indiana, correct? Michigan State. Thank you very much. Sorry, I knew it was a Big 12.
I feel bad for him because I feel like he would have been perfect for that Washington job.
Yeah, man. Kind of sucks that it opened up when it did, but then again,
what are you gonna do about that?
Well, let's say the bag is the bag, so I'm not gonna be mad at him for that. But just a whole lot over on the West Coast, and I hope that in this new world, right? I hope that the Arizonas, the Utahs, the Colorados, and the Big 12, and the LA schools, Washington, Oregon, in the Big 10, and then Stanford and Cal in the ACC. I hope that these programs have success in their new conferences, because I don't want to live in a world where we completely ignore what's happening west of the Rocky Mountains in college football, right? I don't think that that's right. I think that we need to have it.
This was a great season for that purpose of reinvigorating
to remind us.
to remind us the importance of college football west of the Rocky Mountains.
Yes, absolutely.
West of the Mississippi River. And
I agree.
It's another great season of college football. It's never not a great season of college football. This one was entertaining at to no end. It, obviously our team wouldn't do so great, but we're not here to talk about that.
No, my friend. That is going to be an extended hour and a half to 2 hour, maybe even more. I can't even promise you we're going to be under 2 hours, but we're going to go in depth about our beloved Florida Gators next week, Tyler. That is going to be as I said, it's a postmortem. It is an autopsy. It is a dissection. It is a look under the hood, however you want to call it.
It ain't gonna be pretty, is what it's gonna be. But
well, I think that I think listeners, you will be both a little surprised and also a bit understanding with both Tyler and I's opinions on the program. There's a lot of similarities that we share, but I think there are a few key differences that we share, Tyler, in terms of the outlook of the program going forward. And I'm very excited to talk those through next week so that we can, really establish and kind of get a clear picture as to where we were at the beginning of 2023, what happened in that season, what happened after the regular season ended, and now that we have enough time that has passed from signing day and these things, what we can look forward to in the spring, the summer, and going to 2024's regular season. So that'll all be covered next week, listeners, about the Florida Gators. It will be a long one. So if you want to split it up into chunks, I think I'm going to do my best to kind of give you breaks, and we're going to categorize so that way you can listen to, one section at a time, and then to go on and live your life, come back, listen to it another section at a time. It should be evergreen at least through the spring game. So you should have at least a couple months to listen to and break down. So don't worry about that, listeners. Yeah. Tyler, we're going to take a break in a bit. But before we take this break, is there anything else you want to talk about this Natty, the 2023 season, anything else?
I do feel like Michigan winning the title is very indicative of the 2023 season.
Yeah.
I feel it is, I don't want to say right necessarily, but it makes sense. I do think it adequately tells the story of the season that Michigan came and conquered all and finally rose to the mountaintop that they have been chasing for so long, and only incrementally getting further and further towards. It took a big step for them to get this far. And to the credit, the team that Washington built together. It's funny because I talked about those three types of teams that win a national championship, and we're so inclined to believe in the teams that are just recruit better than everyone else. And both those teams lost in the semifinals.
Yeah.
And the team with the superstar quarterback and the team that was the developmental program, they got to the championship game. And that, to me, is an excellent story of the season in how reminds us that there are other ways to win. And that and my favorite thing about college football, especially post NFL, is that how each team is so fundamentally different from the next. Both the offenses, the defenses, the players, the way they run, the amount of variance, the things that can happen. It's an amazing season. It never stops being an amazing season. The final year of the SEC on CBS. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that.
Tyler, I've been so sad about this Dolphins game. You did not need to add that to the list of things that make me sad at this point of the year. Oh man, that's
sorry,
so
buddy.
right.
Hey, when it rains,
And you
it
know
pours.
what? Every time I watched an SEC game this year, I don't know if anyone else noticed it, but they would occasionally, when they'd come back from commercials, they would have on the bottom of the screen a little lower third that would say the SEC, a new era of the SEC coming in 2024. And it's ESPN, ABC, because listeners, if you forgot, the CBS game of the week is moving from CBS over to ESPN, or the Disney family, I should say. No official announcement as to what it will be, but the rumor is that it will be ABC prime time, prime time. Whatever the nationally televised ABC game is will now be the SEC game of the week. So whereas before, the CBS kind of had first dibs on the SEC game, and then Disney and ABC got the rest. Disney, ESPN, ABC got the rest. Now it's all underneath the Disney umbrella. So it'll be on ABC, ESPN, Family Networks, the SEC Network. Every single game will be consumed there, which is great as a fan, right? A one-stop shop. You can literally just get that company and you can have everything at your fingertips on ESPN Plus and all of those things. But Tyler, we are getting the elimination of dun da da dun da 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 dun in terms of its association with the SEC. It will live on, and I kind of am excited for the dun da da dun da 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 dun. Welcome to the Big Ten Game of the Week, where Iowa and Northwestern battle it out. A battle
great.
of 3-16.
That feels sick.
I know. Listen, we're not very like.
I'm so mad.
We're not as I like to say and joke around. Listen, my politics and my ideology on life is very liberal, but when it comes to my football, I get real Republican, and I'm a big. Let me get those corn-fed boys from the South. Let me get those gumbo boys. Let me get those boys that are eating some hogs and throwing some hay around in South Carolina and Kentucky and Tennessee. And I'm gonna miss hearing that song with the SEC football culture that you and I grew up with, went to school with, and love and have a special place in our heart to this day. So, man, damn, Tyler, I forgot about that. Oh,
Sorry.
That's sad. No, it is what it is. You know, it's the end of an era.
This is a huge. This is the last year of an era of college football. Not only the 14 playoff, but as you see on CBS, the teams of the SEC, the divisions are starting to kind of go away. Pac-12 is going to be gone. The Big 12, Big 10, and SEC are all getting new teams. The ACC is technically getting a new team that's on the Pacific Coast, so I don't know how that's going to work out. But
they moved Notre Dame to the West Coast. Come on, I had to, please. It would not be a Natty review if I didn't get my shot at Notre Dame in. Please, I may be sad about my football teams, but it doesn't mean I'm not protecting the brand here. Please, Tyler. But you are correct. Not to stray from the meaningful thing you were saying, but you are correct. It is going to be a new era next year, and I'm excited to see where it goes, Tyler. And I think, Tyler, the last thing that I'll say before we take a quick break is that maybe over the summer we might get a little injection of college football. I'm going to need some of that in our lives regarding a certain video game that may come out in the summer. So just saying,
don't tempt me.
Got some stuff to look forward to. Who knows? Maybe I take over Alabama after they crater to the bottom after the retirement of Nick Saban, Tyler. Who knows?
Maybe.
We will see. And Tyler, we're going to take a quick break.
The people at EA Sports have to be so upset that they probably put such effort into a Nick Saban model and then they don't need it anymore.
No, you know what they should do? And I'm 100% serious here. EA, listen to me. And this will be our transition to our Nick Saban conversation. EA, put Nick Saban on the cover of the new game. I'm serious.
That's a good idea.
Put him on the cover. He retired, new game coming out. It can be a nice little homage to what was in the past, and now we're looking forward in the future. Traditionally, it was always players that had just graduated, right? Because they could finally make money off of their name, image, and likeness back in the day. Remember that, Tyler, when players couldn't make money off their name, image, and likeness when they were college? Wild times. But no, seriously, they can move forward and it can be like a little homage. And I think the first game back, I don't think anyone will be mad about, oh, you put Nick Saban on there? Yeah, I put the GOAT on the return of the decade-long hiatus of a college football video game. We put the GOAT on there who retired earlier this year. I don't think it's that big of a scandal. You know what I mean? But I do think they should put him on with the Michigan State uniform. I think that would be funny. Just as some comedy, you know? All right, Tyler. We'll talk about Nick Saban in a quick second. We're going to take a quick break, ladies and gentlemen. You don't have to do anything. We'll be back in no time. Literally, we'll be back right about now. And we're back. Tyler,
it's finally happened.
You know, I want to just have a quick moment of silence, not for the great Nick Saban's career, but I think for the death of the, you know what, we can push the Nick Saban conversation to another week a bit, because I don't think we can push this one, Tyler.
No, punt's coming our way, man. Like,
it's,
we gotta catch it. Like, we...
Yep, it's it definitely hit us in the face. We did not expect it. We were Tyson Fury with getting caught by the Francis Ngannou punch. think maybe 17 people will get that reference. But Tyler, I don't think you're one of them, but that's okay.
Nope, I am not. I think I can context clues, but
basically, we got hit in the face with this and we were shocked. So we are recording Monday, January 15th. Last Tuesday, January 9th, the day after the national championship game, ladies and gentlemen, Nick Saban announced that he is stepping down and retiring as the head football coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide. He spent 17 seasons as the head coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Before that, he spent a few years as the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. And then before that, he spent 5 years as LSU's head coach, 5 years as Michigan State's head coach, and then he had 1 season as Toledo's head coach, and that was in 1990, where, of course, his first ever head coaching season, he went 9-2 because he's Nick Saban. In total, Tyler, he managed to win 297 regular season games, lost only 71, and had 1 tie, and that tie came in 1995 as the head coach of Michigan State. He finishes 3 wins short of 300 regular season college football wins, which would have been an absurd statistic. And personally, I would have gutted it out 1 more season to be a 300 win. I mean, please. I'm sure there's some kind of insane bonus in his contract that he could have written in. Jimmy Sexton could have written in at the last minute. I don't know. He then also goes 19-2 in bowl games in his career, but obviously he's playing a little bit more than usual because since the playoff era, Tyler, do you want to guess how many national championship appearances he has in the playoff era?
So in the playoff era, that would be 9 years, correct?
That would be, yes, from 2014. From 2014, but 2015, because it was a 2014 season. No, I lied. Starting in 2014. Yes, correct. Starting in 2014. So 9 years. How many playoff appearances do you think that he had? And how many national championship appearances do you think he had?
Playoff appearances, I think it was playoff appearances 7. National championship appearances 6.
National championship appearances 6, correct. Playoff appearances were 7. Yes, correct.
I'm awesome.
Attaboy. There you go, my man. Obviously, Nick Saban finishes with 7 national.
That's an insane statistic.
This is just from 2014.
I don't want to say I'm very happy that I was able to predict it, but that's an insane statistic.
I know, dude. He obviously finishes with 7 national championships, 6 of them being at Alabama, 1 of them coming at LSU, which, if you're wondering, it was a 2003 season, and it is a co-national championship shared with who, Tyler? Fun fact? 03?
It's the USC.
I was going to say, Mr. Angelino, you should know this.
Yeah, it's USC, right?
Yes, it was USC. And
the
they shared that national.
Nobody talks about that one, though.
Nobody talks about that one, exactly. But I bet you LSU talks about that one.
Yeah.
So obviously a decorated career. I personally would say unequivocally the greatest college football coach of all time.
I truly do not think there is an argument.
I don't either. But what's the argument, Tyler? Let's break this down. Let's break Saban down. We know he's the GOAT. I think our listeners all agree he's the GOAT. I can't really find anyone that can argue that. I know a couple of people that have tried to no avail, but consensus says he is the college football coaching GOAT. Why is he that, Tyler?
Well, okay, just base numbers, he wins. He's the winner.
Yes.
Like he has won the most national championships in the shortest amount of time. I think Bear Bryant won. How did Bear Bryant win? It was like
if you want to keep talking, I can pull that up for you.
I will say, Bear Bryant, to reach similar numbers as Nick Saban, took him longer, took him more years. And Bear Bryant won in. Bear Bryant had 38 right seasons of it being a head coach.
He had 25 seasons at Alabama, Bear Bryant did. While Nick Saban had 28 years overall. And in Nick Saban's 17 years at Alabama, he finishes
the same amount of national titles.
The same amount of national titles and just and a better win percentage. Saban had an 877 win percentage at Bama, while Bear Bryant had an 824 at Alabama. So
wow,
yeah,
that's insane.
Yes.
Bear Bryant is also 20, 12, and 2 in bowl games, so not
Correct.
nearly as good.
Yes.
He does have over 300 wins, but he did coach for a longer time. So
He coached for longer, and he coached at 4 different schools. People forget he coached at Maryland for a year in 1945.
Wow, he's all over the place.
He was all over the place. The Bear Bryant story is crazy, but I think the Bear Bryant story definitely influences the Saban story because there is only one person you can compare Saban to, and that is Bear Bryant, right?
Yeah, the only possible person. It's the only person who has literally even the same amount of national titles. And
even if Saban did all of this like not at Bama, like let's say instead of going to Alabama, he went to a different school and turned that school into the juggernaut, I still think the only comparison we would be able to have is Bear Bryant. A lot of people immediately compare Saban to Bryant because of the Alabama connection, but I just think that the comparison should be these are the two greatest these are the two greatest coaches of their era, and definitely two of the top 3 greatest coaches of all time.
Yeah, I think that so the numbers kind of back up Saban. I think Saban is doing it in a harder time of college football.
Tyler, I hate to correct you, but he did it in a harder time. Past tense, my friend. I know. I know. I'm sorry.
We're not even Alabama fans, and I feel sad. Like, and it's not even that like I'm fascinated, beyond fascinated to see what happens to Alabama now. But I will say, it's like I'm sad that like as we shift into Texas and Oklahoma entering the SEC as the 12 team.
He's running from the grind, Tyler. He's running from the
realignment. Saban's just like, this is the time. It is the end of an era in so many ways. Let me make it the end of an era in one more. And yeah, you could argue he's running from the grind. But I think Saban did it in a harder period of time with championship games, both conference championship games and national championship games you had to win. You did not just get voted the national champion.
That is true.
And there's more parity in regards to scheduling, in regards to and just the format by which college football is played, the amount of games each team plays, the bowl system, the playoff. I think Saban has had to earn those titles a bit more than Bear Bryant did, and I'm not trying to take away from that. It's just that, and I think it's documented that Bear Bryant, like, I know that both of them were insane talent collectors, but the roster limitations and regulations that Saban works with are different from what this just didn't exist for Bear Bryant. Like,
no.
And so
I read a great book about Bear Bryant, and there was a whole chapter about the strategy Bear Bryant had to allocate the best talent. There were no NCAA scholarship limitations. There were no limits on how many people you could have on a roster. There are no limits in the amount of players that you could give a scholarship, not just like scholarship players, but just get people scholarships even if they're not playing. There was no limit to that. And so Alabama really mobilized that, and they'd bring in recruiting classes of 40, 50, 60 people simply because they went around the state and they got the best players in Bama, Mississippi, Georgia, Missouri, in these surrounding areas, and just stockpiled the talent. So yeah, no, definitely a more difficult way of acquiring talent for Nick Saban than it was for Bear Bryant. And I would be remiss, Tyler, to say that there was a stretch of Bear Bryant's career where he was very against integration, and it wasn't until he accepted integration that he then kind of bounced back up in the 70s and brought Bama back to where they should have been. So definitely a bit easier said than done there. And I wanted just to make sure we said that and brought that point out, because I'd be remiss if we didn't mention the era in which Bear Bryant did and those famous games that
it's hard to take that away.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult.
But anyway,
back to Saban.
Nick Saban, why is the GOAT? I think my personal reason for why Nick Saban is the GOAT has to do more, though, with the fact that throughout multiple different iterations of college football, Saban continued to change what he did and then continue to be the best.
Mm-hmm.
You've said it a million times. It's one of the most things that you say the most on this show, and I love it, is when you talk about when Saban went out and asked, is this what we want college football to be? Let's make that decision. Because if we do it, I'll be
warned
better
you.
than you. Like
He
I'm
warned
gonna be
you.
better than you. And guess what? He did. Every time that college football has required you to pivot, a new thing, transfer portal, NIL, new iterations of offense, new restrictions, all this stuff. Every time there's been a new craze that has gotten Alabama, he has responded with, "Okay, I'm going to beat you with that too."
Yeah.
Yep. That's why he's the GOAT, because he's the ultimate competitor and he's the ultimate winner. Like, you can beat Alabama for sure, but I don't think you can ever best Alabama.
Alabama has won at least 10 games, Tyler. Not even 10. Yeah. Do you want to tell me you want to guess the last time Alabama didn't win double digit games?
Saban's first year.
Correct, where they went 7-6 in 2007. Every single year since then, he has won at least 10 games, and he has won 10 games only once, and it was in 2010. They ended up finishing 10th in the AP poll that year. Obviously, didn't play for a national championship, but every other year, Tyler, they had at least 11 wins, which is absurd. Which is just absolutely absurd. I also think, Tyler, another reason why Nick Saban is the GOAT isn't on field. I think that there is an older style of coach, right, that we hold up and revere in sports. And it's not just in college football. It's not just in football, professional or collegiate or high school even, but it's in sports as a whole, right? And it is what I'm going to call the Coach Carter effect, right? If anyone's seen Coach Carter, it's a fantastic basketball movie. It's produced by Disney. And it's, this coach that ends up coming in, fixing this high school, gets these kids to really care about school, gets their grades up, gets them into college, and he has them playing like a team, and they end up winning games, right? Takes a team that nobody cares about and then turns them into something that is incredible, right? But I think the biggest thing there is that Saban brought that mentality of the old school coach, the I truly care about these kids mentality, and never wavered upon that. I think along with, I was going to mention, I'm glad you mentioned that, Tyler, is this what we want college football to be like speech, because what I was going to say was that's one of the things that I'll remember Saban the most for, those press conferences. And I think one of the ones that I came across since the announcement of his retirement is what he said about Henry Ruggs after the Henry Ruggs accident in Vegas, where, if you don't know, a few years ago now, rather, Henry Ruggs, former Alabama wide receiver, at the time wide receiver for the for the Vegas Raiders, and he was driving drunk in Vegas at 2 a.m. and was going 156 miles an hour, ended up hitting someone, unfortunately killed someone in the other car. And now he's in jail, unfortunately. And they asked him after a game or something, or a press conference, about Henry Ruggs, and his response was very, very potent. And it really hit home for me, because while he mentioned, yes, like, this is a bad thing that happened and this is a tragedy and his heart goes out to the victims and everything, but then he also said, but my heart also goes out to Henry, his family, everyone there, because, and he went on to say about how this is a kid that never had any issues at Alabama. This is a kid that, made a mistake, and he goes out to challenge, and he says, and I wonder what kind of people you're hanging around. If you're 2:30 in the morning, drunk, driving 150 miles an hour with your girlfriend and your friend, and no one stops you and says, hey man, forget the fact that you're an NFL player and you have a whole career to lose here. Like, you could potentially hurt someone. And I think that the more people like that can stand up and say things like that in people's lives, I think that we as a society will be better off. And Saban really says that, and he really pounded that home and said, we failed Henry Ruggs. We failed him as a group, as people who love him and care for him. And I think it shows just how much Saban really cared about his players. Yes, he has the reputation of being a hard ass. Yes, he has the reputation of, being disciplined and all those things, but he brought a certain level of respect, a certain code, a certain philosophy to being a football coach that is of another era. And I'm glad to see some of these coaches have that as well. But he truly cares. And I think that is one thing that to me makes him the GOAT as well. He was able to maintain that integrity and that class and that ability to really care about those kids without sacrificing the talent, without sacrificing the results on the field, the process, and all of those things. You ask any of these NFL guys who played for Saban, and they'll all be the first people to tell you that Saban was, one of the most important figures in their lives for teaching them discipline, for teaching them how to actually win. All the things that you need to do to win, most of those things are off the field, right? You simply play 60 minutes every week, but the amount of work and preparation and discipline it takes outside of those 60 minutes is stuff that Saban was able to instill to generations upon generations of young men, that I am very glad that we have those young men in our society that were molded by such a respectful figure like Nick Saban. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sports are an avenue for a lot of different things. And believe me, as a Dolphins fan who loves his team, and my friends who say, it's just a game, it's just a game. And they're right, it is just a game. But to some people, it's more than just a game. For the Dolphins, for me, it represents childhood. It represents, I moved a lot around schools, and the Dolphins were one of a few constants in my life throughout all of these home and school changes in my life. And that's why I have such strong attachment to them. Nick Saban is that strong attachment for all of these young men. It means more than just football. The football is a caveat. The football is an avenue to be able to express those qualities of being what an actual man should be like in their case, or woman if it's, someone else that's being other gender, whatever it may be. But in this case, it's young men. What it means to take responsibility, to hold each other accountable, the team aspect, the life lessons that you learn in sports. I don't think that Nick Saban sacrificed those lessons that we are teaching in our youth sports. And I don't think he sacrificed them just because they were at a collegiate level where the stakes were higher. There was a lot more money involved, and there was a lot more responsibility put on these kids' plates. So that is another reason. And I think bigger picture, looking outside of just the on-field product, why I believe Saban to be the GOAT college football coach, in my opinion, as well.
That's awesome. That's very well said.
And on top of that, he could run a dang ball through your face. He could throw it down the field.
On top of that, ain't nobody teach defensive backs how to play better than Saban.
Defensive savant. And my favorite press conference. If this is what we want college football to be like, we'll do it. And man called the shot, and he did it. And I think there's something to be said about the greatness there.
I mean, there's all the things we talked about like all these things that matter, and the thing that we haven't really touched on is the fact that also he's a defensive mastermind. And that
literally a defensive mastermind.
On top of all of this, there are plenty of people that are football geniuses. He was a defensive football genius. Like that is, I'm not understanding that. He's probably
I'll correct you. He still is a defensive genius. He's just not coaching anymore.
Yeah, that's better. He's still got that sharp. Like he is one of two, in my opinion, greatest defensive minds in football, and the other one retired the day after him, and it was his former boss, Bill Belichick. Like,
yes, he did.
And that's things like when you're also like the best to ever do it at one side of the ball, that does help how you become the GOAT. But that that was the thing. It's like, that was such an identity to his early years. And he changed that while never sacrificing the Alabama toughness. I mean, there were teams that weren't as tough as others. There were games that got pushed around here and there. But the standard is so high at Alabama. Yeah. And he is responsible for setting that and for upholding it year in after year after year. So
yep, completely agree.
I don't know if we'll ever see a run quite like this. And it's a winning championship.
Well, think about it, Tyler. In order for us to see a run like this again, we would need someone to kind of take over right now, right? And literally go on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years in a row of double-digit wins, at least 8 appearances, at least 6 appearances, 6, 7, 8, 9 appearances in a national championship game, right? At least that much so. And they'd have to earn the respect of the college football world and be unequivocally revered as the best to do it in their time. I'm looking at Billy Napier. I'm just thinking.
Oh my God.
Sorry, I had to just. I had to address I see a lot of Nick Saban in Billy Napier comments, and I had to get ahead of it before it becomes a meme and stuff. I'm aware of what I said a few years ago. All right, I'm dying on I'm dying on the Billy Napier hill. You guys know this. You'll hear about it more next week. No, I don't think he's the next Nick Saban. I definitely was a little ahead of my sales. All right, just openly saying this on the airwaves so that there is a record of that comment. All right, but the point is,
joke though.
Thank you very much. But the point is, someone needs to do it at that level for 15 plus years, and I don't see that happening, Tyler.
I'm not saying it can never happen, but oh boy, it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. And a credit to, I want to say real quick, a credit to Nick Saban's greatness is the University of Alabama itself. I think Stephen Godfrey's talked about this a lot, where
Stephen Godfrey or Split Zone Duo, if those aren't aware, great podcast, highly recommend.
He's talked about this a lot, where it's like, it almost, as much as Nick Saban is the GOAT, the University of Alabama is of all the universities in the country, is the most aligned towards their football program out of any university in the country. Yes. Everything, the alignment, the trajectory, everything is locked in to go in the same direction that Nick Saban guides, and everyone is lockstep behind it. Mm-hmm. That their willingness to be a part of that and to be supportive of it and to give him the resources he needs is a part of his greatness. Is also the reason that the other GOAT of the sport was a coach at Alabama. That's, you cannot separate those. It's like Alabama is the standard from an institutional perspective. Correct. And there have been times that Alabama has been bad. And buddy, it does excite me, the prospect. I do not hate Alabama. I want to be very clear. It's like, it does
from a content perspective.
From a content perspective, it will be interesting to see Bama be bad if that ever happens again. Which I'm not sure if that's going to happen anytime soon.
Struggle. At the very least, struggle.
At the very least, struggle.
Right. I'm with you, man.
It's kind of poetic. It is poetic for the story of college football that Nick Saban's final game was at the Rose Bowl. I do think that's beautiful.
It is very poetic in that sense. Which brings me, Tyler, to a question I want to ask you. After the Rose Bowl game, I said on this podcast and off this podcast that I thought that the Nick Saban Rose Bowl was one of his best coaching jobs ever. And it's kind of poetic, like you said, that's now his last game as he goes off into the sunset, pun intended. But it was an insane coaching job, which brings you to the question.
The whole season was an insane coaching job.
Exactly. Like, this season was something that many around the program are saying, like, this was probably one of his best coaching jobs, which brings me to ask the question. I know that he said that he felt that he wasn't 100% as on top of things as he used to be, but that's understandable for a 72-year-old man. But Tyler, why do we think that he decided to retire right now? I understand what he said, but let's look a little bit further. You're a writer. I'm an actor. I like to think I'm a writer sometimes. Maybe my fingers will start to work again one day. But what's the deeper meaning here? What is the theme? Why do we really think he's stepping away, especially if, as he has said, he's going to still have an office at Bama. He's going to be involved in practice. He's going to be involved with the program. He's taking on kind of a Steve Spurrier role that he has at Florida. He's kind of taken that on at Bama, but obviously much more modern because he's been much more involved in the game lately than Spurrier has. But why do we think that, Tyler? Why do we think he's leaving away at arguably one of the high moments in his coaching abilities right now? Why now?
What I would say is, I think it's funny. I made a joke about this about myself last night because a little backstory. So I play D&D, as I think listeners know, and I've been working a lot lately now that the strike is over and I'm back to work, and so I haven't had time to do as much prep as I usually do. Mm-hmm. So I went into our session last night and I just looked at it. And I was like, wow, I love doing this, and when I have time, I love doing the crazy amount of prep that I do to make my experience so good for my friends. But the rate I'm going at is unsustainable for where I'm at right now. And maybe to me, it feels like this season maybe feels like to him, because it was his best coaching job, which means it was probably his hardest coaching job.
And very true.
Took the most energy to get to that point. maybe he looks at his roster. There's obviously people made the joke. Oh, he looks at the roster. He looks at Jalen Milroe coming back, and he's like, "This is not what it." Which I don't think that Nick Saban thinks that way.
Right.
But what I will say is that what he may think is like to keep going at the standard that he sets for himself.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's just unsustainable, the amount of work that his body can. Maybe it's true. Maybe his body just can't really take it anymore. Maybe he just really can't. I mean, like if you look at it one way, Nick Saban is all over recruiting. He obsesses about it. Mm-hmm. Now you don't just have to recruit high schoolers. You also have to recruit other rosters through the transfer portal. You have to recruit your own roster to prevent people from transferring. Because at one-time transfer, anybody can transfer at any time. And at Alabama, they're not going to let up for anybody just to make them like you more. Like
no.
And maybe that's like so your recruiting side has basically tripled the amount of areas that you have to like keep attention at. And I know that a lot of programs, like Florida in particular, is doing this, are hiring general manager style office positions to look over the roster and other rosters and like be in charge of that process. Nick Saban is not going to outsource that to other people. Even if they hire that person, he's going to be directly involved in that process. Mm-hmm. So keeping the roster together is going to require more work that he'd be great at, but more work than it used to. He doesn't have a star quarterback coming back. Jalen Milroe is good. Is a great college quarterback, but he's not a star. He's not an NFL star, which Bama has built on the backs of NFL stars these last 5-10 years, which is crazy to think about. But
it's a testament to Saban's recruiting is what it is.
It really is. And so therein becomes like, I just think to continue to operate at the level of the standard at which he holds himself, I imagine that it is just unsustainable. And he cannot put that much stress. Because here's the thing. I don't think that Nick Saban is obsessed with his legacy. There's some coaches that like there's a small part of me that thinks that Bill Belichick is a little obsessed with his own legacy.
Bill Belichick, who also parted ways with the team that he's been long associated with New England, he's chasing Don Shula's coaching record. Like that's unequivocally. It's well known. That is what he wants to do, which tells us that he is worried about his legacy. I think I agree with you. I think the fact that Saban retired with 297 means that he's not really concerned about his legacy. He knows that legacy-wise, it's it. He's the GOAT. He could lose 15 games every year for the next 5 years, and it would still be Nick Saban the GOAT, just maybe in a different era. You know?
I think Nick Saban is just doing. I think he's pulling a Jerry Seinfeld, where he's like, "This show needs to end at the time that it needs to end." Yeah, we could keep going. Like, Nick Saban. I feel Nick Saban could coach for another 5 years.
And win 10 games a year doing it.
Yeah, but is that going to be good enough for him?
That's true.
Their goal is to win championships. And if Nick Saban feels that he can't sustainably do that anymore, maybe it's time to step away.
So,
because to me, what I will say is like Nick Saban does not feel like the type of person to walk away after you win that national championship. I truly don't feel that about him. I feel like I don't know. I feel like he does it. He's excited about it, and then he's back to work.
Well, he's the guy that famously wins the national championship, does the press conference, and as he's leaving the press conference, is on the phone with recruits already. Like he doesn't even celebrate the title he just won. He's already thinking about the next one, which leads me, Tyler, to my next question. We know that he's going to have an office at Bama. We know that he's going to be involved. He showed up at work at 7 a.m. the day after announcing he retired. Like he still has his office and all these things. He's going to be working with Kalen DeBoer and being in the building. Do you think that Saban can just turn that off? You know, like, yeah, he says he retires and stuff, but everything is indicating that he's going to be at least involved or be a presence around the Alabama football program going forward. And rightfully so, as he should, as the greatest college football coach of all time and the greatest, probably greatest Alabama coach of all time as well. Like it rightfully so. And you earned that after 17 years. But is this something that's going to work? I think of, and I don't want to say this is something I don't want to say this is something I believe will happen, but I look at Phil Fulmer at Tennessee, who was a legend at Tennessee and is a legend at Tennessee. And when he retired, he kind of stayed on and did the same thing. And we've kind of had the Tennessee circus in the 21st century here. Times it's been weird and funny and all these things. And I'm not saying that Alabama's going to spiral down into that, or that Saban's going to turn into Fulmer and jump in and fire guys and try to take over. But, I can imagine that there's some sort of anxiety amongst, with Saban in terms of having that competitive nature be so wired in his DNA for decades and decades and decades that you can't just turn that switch off. How do you? I don't know how that's going to work, and I don't know if we don't have an answer for that. It's just we're going to have to see. But I'm very curious moving forward to see how much of an imprint Saban has. Maybe he becomes that GM style role for Alabama. But is he gonna? I don't know. I just don't know. Because famously, and again, I'm not wishing this upon anyone. I'm not wishing this upon Saban. But famously, Bear Bryant, a few years after he retired from coaching, just died because that's all he could do. I don't think that's what will happen to Saban, and I definitely hope that's not what happens to Saban.
I don't think that's going to happen to Saban.
But there's something to be said about that coaching DNA of just being able to turn it off when you can. Is Saban going to do it? How much is he going to be involved going forward with the Alabama program? I don't know, and I'm excited to see how that develops. What do you think? Do you have an opinion, or are you on the same page as me of just we'll see what happens?
I think you just have to see what happens because, Nick Saban seems like a guy who's also extremely self-aware of himself. That's kind of one of the traits of part of the thing that makes him separate from himself is that he can make these changes, can make these switches, which most coaches just do the things it is a integral known fact about football coaches that they just are the way that they are. And
they're wired differently.
You cannot expect a football coach to change the way that they are. You can hope for it, and some of them do, especially when they're faced up against Dabo Swinney did it in a lot of ways. I'm hoping Billy Napier can do it. That's a separate thing. But for the most part, you can usually set your clock to the fact that coaches will not change what they do. And Nick Saban does not strike. Part of the reason that he's the best is that he is so willing to change things to be for the best thing. So I do feel like he has the self-awareness, I think, to make this transition work. And again, part of the whole Alabama being just the best institution in the country from a football perspective, they get to keep him, but it really just depends on the level at which they allow him to that he's allowed to participate in. And basically what I really mean by that is the level at which he chooses to participate, because no one's going to tell Nick Saban what to do. And I think no one does that. I think it's a good sign that Alabama hired from outside for their head coach. I think that is a very good sign for them that they did not promote from within. Because then it's just Saban's team, but he's not pulling the strings. He's just hanging over it. Now he gets to add his part of it. It's his players. It's his program. But you don't want a Saban assistant or a Saban puppet running that program underneath him.
Yeah, no, I can definitely agree with that.
In my opinion, I think it has more opportunities to work than Phil Fulmer or any of that. But I think that I truly don't know, because we've never seen Nick Saban in this role.
And I'll be curious to see how he works well with great transition, Tyler, with Kalen DeBoer, who former Washington head coach. We just talked about him earlier this episode about the national championship game, about the great season that he had up in Washington, up in Seattle. Well, now he comes over. He brings his offensive coordinator as well. What do you think, Tyler? What do you think about what could happen with Kalen DeBoer at Bama? We both love him as a coach. Definitely say we love him as a coach.
I think it's a great hire.
But we've both been on record to say that the coach that follows Saban is in for a difficult task, and I'm not sure that person can succeed. Now, this was obviously before knowing speculation and everything who it was going to be. I think they made a fantastic hire. I'm just very curious to see how he lives up to expectations. And I think that if they do stay on this We Are Alabama trajectory of what they have been the past 15 years with Saban, then I think it's just going to be another feather in Kalen DeBoer's cap rather than, just being oh, well, that's Bama. No. I think it could go very wrong as well. What are your thoughts? What are your expectations with Kalen DeBoer at?
I think I love that they went outside of the Saban tree entirely. They went to a guy that has no Saban like connection. Kalen DeBoer has been a winner at every place that he's been at. His rise has been relatively meteoric, and on top of that, though, he's extremely steady Eddie. He is not very emotional. He is very calm, which is actually funny enough. That is a switch from Nick Saban, who I don't want to like never like loses his stuff in a bad, not emotional in a bad way. But Nick Saban is not like a calm individual.
No, he'll tell you when you're doing when you're acting up and you're doing poorly.
Yeah, but the Kalen DeBoer, I think, has proven a lot with the Washington teams that he's led, with the Fresno State teams before that. He is a winner. He has him and Ryan Grubb have a well-designed offense focused on highlighting the playmakers that they have. It's that way of like, what do we have on our roster? Let's make the best offense for that. And for Washington this year, that was we're just going to throw it everywhere. But I think at the same time, they're still leaning on Dylan Johnson. They're still trying to get the offensive line going. There is a very holistic approach here that I think is going to work wonders for Kalen DeBoer. I have questions about the recruiting because Kalen DeBoer is not a Southeastern guy by footprint. However, if you have Nick Saban in the building and you're Alabama, I mean,
no, I hear you.
It's probably going to be fine, but there is the reality that like recruiters recruit, and like if you're an elite recruiter, you get elite talent to you. You recruit well, and I don't think he's a bad recruiter. I don't know Kalen DeBoer's recruiting profile, but that would be
clearly he's a good identifier of talent.
Very
in terms of the guys that he had on that Washington roster.
Mike Penix Jr. was broken before he got to Washington, and he turned him into an NFL prospect. Like he's a great evaluator of talent, but we'll see, because like that's the thing that I think is going to be the biggest difference is that I'm curious about. The elite run of number 1, number 2, number 3 classes that Saban pulled in, I don't expect that to be sustainable. Those 10 wins, honestly, with this roster and the way the infrastructure is, I could see them hitting 10 wins for a couple more years. You know, like if we'll see.
Well,
it depends.
We'll have to see how many players.
It depends on the Isaiah Bond, wide receiver, is already transferred out to Texas, which, but. I mean, the recruiting is the part that I'm the most curious about, because they got a guy who I know can coach ball.
Yeah,
we know Kalen DeBoer is a good coach. He just was in a national championship game and also this thing, the scheme in that championship game was great. The plays were great. The players were open. Michael Penix Jr. just missed them. That doesn't say anything about Kalen DeBoer. And I love my favorite trait of his, as I've talked about many times in the show, is that he truly trusts his players. And that's a really awesome thing. So I think it's an amazing hire. Bama said, we're going to hire a good football coach, not like a Saban clone or someone who understands the footprint. It is like, we need to hire a good football coach, someone we know wins. Kalen DeBoer wins.
Think they nailed the hire. I just, like you said, curious to see what happens.
And that's the thing. Is like, I don't think that like, people might look at Washington and be like, oh, but he can't build a team that's good in the trenches, which is ridiculous because Washington won the Joe Moore Award. But no, it's just like the talent you have in the South is gonna equal that out. Again, the question is, the SEC is about to get even tougher. He dominated the Pac-12, but and the Pac-12 was really good this year. Yeah. But the SEC is going to be tough. Recruiting's going to be tough. I think that's the area that I don't expect Alabama to win all those recruiting battles like they would before. Like you're in a recruiting battle with Alabama and you're like, why are we even here? Like, I don't really expect that to be the standard as much. And that's the most interesting thing to me, because I don't think the results are going to be that quick. I don't think that this is going to be a 7-16 next year. They're too talented. Kalen DeBoer is too good of a coach. Like, I think they'll be really good.
I agree.
I don't know if I'm going to pick them to win the SEC. I probably won't. It's probably going to be a Texas-Georgia championship game for me. But I could easily see Alabama getting to that level. And I don't know. Maybe
making an impact.
Maybe they make Jalen Milroe even better.
or maybe they, maybe they don't make the conference title game and stuff like that, but maybe they, they hand, I don't know, LSU's 9-1 or whatever, and if they win this game, they clinch a spot in the title game, in the conference title game, and they upset them on the road or something. You know what I mean? Like, this Alabama team is still good enough and good to do those things. I am curious. I do think that I think at one point I said that Washington was college football's team, the real college football fans team this past year, because partially the Kalen DeBoer like path and rise upward, was NAIA national championships, and then coaching over at other programs, and then Fresno State and Washington, and this non-traditional route, and now that guy that I was like, yeah, the hipster, this and that, the college football fans coach kind of thing, is now the head coach at Alabama and succeeds Saban. Like, it's the most like evil empire acquisition that could have happened. It feels like, if you're a pro wrestling fan, it feels like when a great indie wrestler and stuff then gets on AEW, pops off, and then he like all of a sudden shows up in WWE, and it's like, oh, he went to the Fed. Okay, he went where the money is. He went where the exposure is, where the branding is. I get it. I respect it. I'm not going to hate on it. Do you secure your bag? Not going to be a hater. But like, part of me is like, man, I wish we had coaches like that at the, quote unquote smaller brands. And
I feel heartbroken for Washington, because they knocked it out of the park with their coaching hire.
Yeah.
And then they lost it. And it's like, after being in the national championship game, you like reached one step below the pinnacle, like one step, like there's almost nothing you could do more.
And it's yet another high-level coach from the Pacific Northwest who gets pulled and poached and heads down to the Sun Belt area and the SEC territory footprint.
I feel bad. That being said, I absolutely get Kalen DeBoer's decision.
Like 100%. I can't hate on it. I can't, and I also get Jed Fish's decision to take that Washington job and leave Arizona after what he was doing there.
I am torn about that, because I do. Well, it's my thing. I don't know how good Jed Fish really is. Obviously, Arizona has improved, but that part of me is just like, is this on the back of them finding a star, Noah Fifita at quarterback? Because we've seen many times in college football that the star player, makes the coach. Hello, Ed Orgeron. It's good to see you again.
You ain't gotta do that.
It's true. Like, now that's an extreme case, but
right.
What's the thing is, like, okay, Jed Fish had never been a head coach before, in my understanding. He's in Arizona. They're slowly getting better. They have been better. They find Noah Fifita. They pop off 10 wins. He goes to Washington. I get the career trajectory. So the things like, they hired Kalen DeBoer, and I'm like, Kalen DeBoer is like a proven winner at multiple levels of football. So
yes.
But this is the only time that Jed Fish has won like 10 games, because he's only been a head coach for like 4 seasons, right? 3 actually. So we'll see. I get.
Wait, you mean to tell me that Jed Fish had a breakout year in his 3rd season after inheriting a program that was in shambles for the first 2 seasons? Is that what you mean to tell me?
I did. Well, that is true.
Interesting. Good to know. And he won those 10 games after most people before the season thought that he wouldn't win those 10 games because of the difficulty of the schedule. Is that what you're saying?
Something like that.
Oh, weird. Interesting. Huh. Where have I seen that before?
Oh my gosh, you are insufferable.
Tune in next week. Tune in next week.
Oh, it's gonna be one of our best episodes yet.
You know it, baby.
No, I do think Jed Fish, I think, good hire. I'm interested. I'm just interested. I'm interested to see how it goes, because that is the thing where it's like, okay, you were okay, and then you shot to awesome, but that was right around the time that you found Noah Fifita. Like, so is that him? Did you just find an awesome player, or did your coaching job make this player awesome? Like,
yeah, I mean, and that's always been the question, right? It's for a while. It was it Urban or was it Tebow? Was it Ed Orgeron or was it Joe Burrow? There's been those questions. Was it Les Miles or was it, some of the other guys that were there in the generational defenses? It's always a question of who is it? Was it Bill Belichick or is it Tom Brady? And that's a completely different tier, obviously, but there's always been that question. And I agree with you. I'm curious to see if he can be able to recreate that success at Washington. And if he can recreate that success at Washington, then I think we have that proof of concept of, okay, this guy is a proven winner at multiple different spots. This guy can produce at a different level. And then I'll be able to entertain conversations about Jedd Fisch coming home. I got you. Okay. I am with you. I understand the
That's the thing, I
subtext of
needed
this
to see-
conversation. Okay.
I needed to see consistency, and now it's going to be even harder to judge because it's a different place.
But it would be more impressive if he continues to be
would
at that
more
level.
Impressive,
So,
especially considering all that we know that Washington is giving up. This is not about Jedd Fisch, though.
no, it's not. I just wanted to point out that he's the one replacing DeBoer and all that stuff.
I think it's a great hire, and I hate that they hired who I think is a great football coach. And I just am so interested to see what I do want to see Alabama be bad, just because I want to see how people who are not used to Alabama being bad respond to it. I think it'd be fun.
So you and I are old enough to remember at least a little bit of those mid 2000s of Bama being bad, but I don't really remember much, and my only image of Bama is this image of Bama excellence that's been the past 15, 17 years. So I am very curious to see a college football world without Nick Saban and, what Alabama can be in the post-Saban era. Wow, it's crazy that that's here. It is the post-Saban era.
It is kind of nice, though, because this coupled with the Pete Carroll and the Bill Belichick leavings, in the NFL, we had a version of this where it was a lot of the star quarterbacks we'd had for 20 years have all retired. Last of them really being Tom Brady. But, like Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Eli Manning, Brett Favre has been gone for a while. Kind of Aaron Rodgers is kind of like the last holdout of it.
It depends on what your opinion of his Achilles is, but
yeah, well, that's a whole other conversation. But the point being, we've kind of experienced this, we're in a new era of the game, and we're kind of getting that in college football, but also in the NFL, with these coaches. It's just I kind of like that it's all happening at once, because I like seeing this new era that we're going into, truly. It's just it's fascinating to see, and I do think that I'm glad that it times out to a point of, we're going to the first year of the 12-team playoff. We're going into the new SEC, in the end of the Pac-12, new Big 10, new Big 12, all this new stuff. And with it, it's what a perfect time for our GOAT to say, all right, that's enough. Give it to somebody else now.
Yeah, you can definitely say he's got an understanding of storytelling for sure. And I respect that. Absolutely.
But I wouldn't get to meet. I just want to meet Nick Saban.
Yeah, he seems like a good hang. Yeah. I do want to know, Tyler, before we wrap this episode up, I do have this, I don't know. I feel like Nick Saban's going to stay in our lives for quite a long time. Obviously, they announced earlier in the year that Lee Corso will be coming back to game day next year. But obviously, college football's grandfather, can't be on TV forever. And as long as he wants to do it, I think he should, or at least be involved in some way, even though sometimes it is kind of difficult to watch him up there sometimes. But, if that's what makes him happy in that sense, then, by all means, who am I to judge? But is there a world where we see Saban in our lives? How, these older coaches just kind of live in our lives in a commentary role and such? Because he seems prime, and it would be a layup, I think, for Saban to really take over the Corso spot on game day. They would just have to let him be him, They would have to let him be him. And I'd love hey, coach, show us what happened in this play last week. Why do you think this team will beat this team? What are you seeing schematically? I would love to get into the brain of Nick Saban. I hope that that's his next iteration, right? He was a greatness for so long and was the GOAT for all this time. I would love to pick his brain and be able to have something on television that the mass public can consume, so that he can share that knowledge that has been contained just to the coaching world, just to the media world, and just to the players that he's been with. I'd love for that to be out there. That's my dream for the post Saban coaching.
I think Saban would kill it as a media personality. I really do. I think he'd kill that. I think he'd do great appearances. I think he's more charismatic than people give him credit for, because we only ever really see the hard ass version of him.
If you've heard his radio show that he used to do every week, that he's got a sense of humor. That he's not afraid of that, and even his interactions with the media and in press conferences and stuff. by all accounts, Saban has been, really easy to work with. He's not this guy that's like, the media is against us and this and that or whatever. He understands the media's role in the college football ecosystem. And I agree with you. I think it'd be fantastic on television. And I kind of hope that's what ends up happening personally. Would love to see it.
Me too. I'd love to. I'm sure he'll stay in our lives. I hope he's on the cover of EA Sports.
I hope so.
Football.
I hope that ends up being it. EA, please, by all accounts, just let us be on the rolled out marketing team. We'd love to help put this thing out. Take that idea.
You didn't put out your trailer in the national championship game, which I don't know why I really believe that would happen because they never showed video game trailers until like a month or two out. But
you know why, Tyler? Because nobody reads Matt Brown's Extra Points newsletter, which I'm going to plug right here. He is the preeminent source on the college football EA NCAA college football video game that's coming out. He has been for years now. He's been on top of this story, and he was telling us weeks ago, temper your expectations. There's not going to be much going on that national title day. If there's anything, it's literally just going to be like an announcement that the game's on track. Like, please don't get your hopes up. What did everyone do? They got their hopes up. So my man,
they got
Brown,
they got mad at EA Sports for not doing a thing that they never agreed to do.
Exactly. Yeah. You got mad at someone for not doing something that they never said they'd do. I just want to emphasize that to people. So I hope he's on the cover as well, Tyler. I think it would be a very fitting thing. And it'd be a very fitting thing for the first game to come back to have Nick Saban on the cover as a bookend to this prior era of college football moving forward, like you said, into the new one. And I couldn't say it better myself. You said it so perfectly then. So
if he's not, who do we think is on the cover?
Ooh, would it be a current player or would it be a la the tradition of somebody who just graduated and such?
I feel like it'd be a current player. I mean, give me an answer for either.
All right. Well, if it's a former player, I think they would go with Caleb Williams because I do think he has the most mass appeal and name value of a college football player from this past season. If they go with someone who just recently finished up, if they go with a current player,
like for this upcoming season,
for this, maybe it's Quinn Ewers.
That's where my mind went because he's the highest profile quarterback returning.
Name wise, yeah, I think so. He's the highest profile. Maybe Quinn Ewers. Maybe, is Blake Corum coming back?
Blake Corum, I'm pretty sure Blake Corum's a senior.
Okay, all right. I would have said Blake Corum if he was coming back. That would have been
maybe
layup.
Carson Beck, the Georgia quarterback. Nah, I don't really feel like that's it.
Taking
Daniels is gonna be gone.
Even taking my Florida fandom out of it, I still don't think Carson Beck would be a suitable
I think he's
choice.
good.
I think that'd be popular. That'd be popular in Georgia.
And that's things like Carson Beck has the chance to do this season to do that.
Correct.
To get to that level because he played really well this past season, but he's not there yet.
Right. I agree.
I don't know, man. It's a weird time. A lot of quarterbacks.
What if they regionalize it? What if you get a different cover?
Magazines?
Like the Athlon, yeah. What if you get a different cover?
Cool. I'd try to collect all the cases. That'd be smart if they did that.
That would be really cool. That would be cool. All right, Tyler. Any last thoughts on Saban before we sign off?
It's just I don't even say it's sad. It's just like crazy that this finally happened. We've talked about it for years about what's it gonna be like when Saban retires, and it finally happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I can't feel my fingers. It's like this numbing inevitability of the march of time.
Yeah.
That one day we will talk about Nick Saban, like the guy from your uncle talks about Bear Bryant.
Bear Bryant, yeah.
I can't wait to be like, y'all don't know how good.
I will 100% be like, yeah, but he ain't no Nick Saban. In 40
my dad still talks about Don Shula about that. He's like,
as he should. As he should. As he should.
Did I ever tell you the story about my mom and Don Shula?
No.
When my dad, so obviously the Jags are not a thing yet. But they both live in Jacksonville. The Jags have not existed. So this has got to be in high school.
Okay.
And my dad is over at my mom's family's house, and they're watching like the Dolphins game. And like my papa is there, my mom's dad, everything. And my mom came in, and it was just like looked at the TV. He's like, "Who's Don Shula?" And my dad got up, shook my grandfather's hand, said, "Thank you, Mr. Mulcher, for having me over," and walked out the door.
No.
And then my grandpa looked at my mom and said, "You messed up." So, obviously, they are still together, and they got over that. But
no, but honestly though, like I've loved your dad before that story. It's just like moved up a couple notches. That's
Yeah.
incredible. That is fantastic. I didn't know this.
He grew up being a Dolphins fan, so could have been the Bucks, but
Could have been the that was good. Could have been the Bucks.
But yeah. With that, it's just it's crazy. This is such a staple of my understanding of college football is Nick Saban.
Yeah.
And I really am happy to see as time moves on that is going to change, because it's like Steve Spurrier is that for my parents. Like he is like the lens by which they view their college football like lives, is like everything in comparison to the way they experienced it when they were in college and Steve Spurrier was there. And so it's like that for me. Is like when I fell in love with college football was at the height. Like when I really fell in love with it was at the height of the Nick Saban experience, and it will forever like temper the way that I look at the sport. And I'm happy about that, but I'm also happy that we're going to get to experience new versions of that. So
yeah, me too.
It's
absolutely.
It's a momentous time in college football. It is a momentous offseason.
Yes, it is a pivotal offseason.
Retired, all of his juju is going to enter into Billy Napier, and so that he can become the next Nick Saban.
You spoke it. You took the words out of my mouth, Tyler.
It's an avatar. It's an avatar situation. You can't have two at the same time.
You can't. It's impossible. But it's okay, because we'll have that conversation about Billy Napier next week. Don't you worry. I think the last thing I want to say before we sign off is that I just also love that Nick Saban did it in the most Nick Saban way. Just like, a Tuesday announcing his retirement, a random Tuesday right after the Natty, kind of realizing, I think I'm done. And just doing it. He was conducting interviews for a wide receiver coach like 10 minutes or like right before he went and like announced. Like he worked a full normal day, did interviews, was in meetings, and then at the end of the day went over, had the conversations with whoever he had to have the conversations with, and said, "Yeah, guys, I'm done." Like, how incredible is that Nick Saban was a worker and doing it to his way? I know, right?
It's so him that he was just like, "You know what? I just decided I'm done today."
Yep, that's exactly how it happened. So nothing but respect to the GOAT. Thank you so much for the 17 years at Alabama and the over 20-something years as a head football coach. I'll forgive you for the stint in Miami. I will forgive you for the stint in Miami, for all you've given me in college football. But I know a lot of people that down here that still haven't forgiven him. But it's not easy to forgive when you're a miserable.
It's all that team doctor. It's nothing to do with Nick Saban. It's the team doctor.
Well, when they asked him, he was like, we had a chance to get the quarterback. I'm not reliving this, Tyler. I'm not reliving this Dolphin stuff anymore. I want to ignore the Miami Dolphins for at least another month and a half. Like I can't think about it.
You had Nick Saban. I had Urban Meyer.
It just didn't work out for either of us.
Didn't work out. I think mine was way worse.
Oh my God. All right, Tyler. Listen, we'll be back next week. We will talk about our beloved Florida Gators. We will have the Gators postmortem. We will go in depth on everything that happened in the season. We will talk about where we were mentally and emotionally at the beginning of the season versus where we are now at the end of the season. We'll talk about the signing class. We'll talk about what to expect going next year. We'll go through the schedule. We'll see the things that we want Billy Napier to improve on, the things that we think he already did improve on, what we like, what we don't like, all of those things. Massive conversation all about the Gators next week. So if you're not a Gators fan, I would love for you to listen so you can get an insight as to the program from two Florida fans who follow it closely. But I would understand if you don't. But yes, next week is all Florida Gators related. And then Tyler, I think after that, we need to start having some conversations about what we're going to do in the offseason. So stay tuned for that stuff, ladies and gentlemen. And we'll be having some offseason episodes, including some special guests coming on that we owe episodes about. Who knows what the content will be, but there will be content nonetheless coming through this offseason. So anything else you want to say, Tyler, before we sign off?
No, just can't wait to rip into the Florida Gators program next week.
I like to use the word astute analysis is what the phrase I'd like to
Cool.
use, Tyler.
You feel free to use that. I'm gonna use the term rip into it.
Tune into Sideline Judgment Civil War next week.
No, but I'm glad we were able to finally have the Nick Saban conversation.
Me too, my friend. Me too.
And
me too.
It won't be the last time we talk about Nick Saban for sure.
No.
It's crazy.
End of an era.
It's the Nick Saban conversation.
Yep.
Crazy.
End of an era. All righty, Tyler. This has been another episode of Sideline Judgment. My name is Sergio.
My name is Tyler.
And we are not biased, Tyler, but I think for today, Tyler, we could just say thank you, Nick Saban.